Alright, hello people from the internet, hello everyone, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. It is Nine Settler here once again with another spell overview. This week we are doing Poison Magic. We're getting pretty close to the end, we're almost done. Um, it's only Poison Magic and Conjurations left, best for last. Mm, so before I begin the video, two things. First one is that I recently made a Patreon. You can subscribe to it if you feel like it, if you draw enough value out of the things that I do and you want to compensate me for that. The Patreon is right there, and I would appreciate it a lot, actually. It does help a lot. That's the first thing. The second thing is that you should probably speed up the video since that's just what I would recommend. 1.25, 1.5, whichever one suits your desires. Anyway, talking about poison magic, it provides spells which are highly effective against many natural creatures. As you can see, the description is very lackluster. The second line is pretty much what you would see on every other school, so there's no point in mentioning it. If you've read it once, you've read it all the time. But with that being said, let us begin with poison magic, alright? And the very first spell of poison magic is Sting. Sting briefly transforms one of the caster's limbs into a long insectoid stinger, which lashes out at the target. The stinger's impact will always poison a susceptible target. Even resistant targets have a chance to be poisoned, and immune monsters will be damaged by the physical impact of the stinger. This is unfortunately only a level 1 spell, and therefore it deals very bad damage, because the effect used to be on a level 6 spell that used to be a player spell, but now is only limited to monsters, called Poison Arrow. Poison Arrow was pretty much the same thing as this, with more range and more damage, because it was level 6. And it was also not Transmutation, it was Conjuration's Poison. And that spell was incredible. It was a really, really strong spell while it existed, but it was removed eventually, and Sting got turned into this. The part where even immune monsters will be damaged by the physical impact of the stinger is, in my opinion, kind of a mockery, because if you start a Venom Mage, this is your level 1 spell, and you don't really have the ability to use it to kill whites or to kill any of the early game poison immune monsters that you're gonna encounter. Do note that it does work against poison resistant monsters, so you can use it against oozes. Well, I guess they're called endoplasms now. You can use it against those. You can use it against water moccasins. You can use it against black mambas. There's a fair amount of poison resistant monsters that straight up can get poisoned by Sting. Of course, that's not particularly the most useful of things, since those monsters also happen to be pretty scary, and you generally shouldn't give them that many turns, especially at the very low range that Sting has. But it does work very well if you happen to find Ignite Poison, which I will talk about in a bit. As a starting spell, I would say this is competent. It's definitely not the greatest, the starting spell. I guess that would be Freeze. Personally, I think that's the greatest. But it's also not terrible, It's not like Old Pain. Pain was such a bad spell. I do think that this could be buffed a bit. In my opinion, it would be great if it was like level 3 and could actually be used to kill things that Venom Mage has issues with, such as those Whites and Skeletal Warriors that I already mentioned. But it is something that will most likely never happen. Anyway, next on our list is Poisonous Vapors. Poisonous Vapors turns the air around the targeted creature toxic, directly inflicting poison on the target before dispersing. This is a level 2 poisoner spell, as you can see. It has full screen range, smite targeting for a full screen range spell, and it also doesn't check evasion, doesn't check any kind of defense. The only thing it checks is poison resistance. If the monster is not poison resistant, it will get poisoned, and then you can cast this more to poison the monster more. With good spell power on this spell, the amount of poison that you can inflict is insane. You can get monsters to extremely poisoned with a single cast later in the game. The amount of utility that this spell has for being such low level is actually insane. This spell is easily one of the best spells in the game. It almost guarantees a one run if you find it early enough, because it often comes in other books with fantastic spells, such as the Book of Vapours, I think it's called. The Book of Clouds. I don't remember which one it is, but it has this. It has Meph and it has Freezing Cloud. That book is really good. Unfortunately, Freezing Cloud, which is the best out of those three spells, is very expensive, being a level 5/3 school spell. But it is a pretty good spell regardless. You will hear more about that spell in my Ice Magic overview, which is the very first one that I made. If you want to hear more about that one. When it comes to Meph, I will mention it later in this video. And yeah, Poisonous Vapours is just a really good spell. Really, really good. It is fantastic for carrying characters. Easily the best level 2 spell in the game, and one of the best spells to find in the early game overall. I have nothing but the highest praise for Poisonous Vapours. It is great, and it is a very signature spell that exemplifies what I like to do in this video game. So I like it a lot. I wish more spells were like Poisonous Vapours with that level of efficiency and power. I do have to say that this spell, obviously, since it's single target, is not good at dealing with bans. But that is really not an issue that the Venom Mage has, as you're gonna see with some of the later spells in this list. But with that being said, I think the next on our list is going to be Spider Form. Spider Form transforms the caster into a venomous spider-like creature. The caster becomes highly evasive and gains a poisonous bite, but gains vulnerability to poison. While transformed, any equipped weapons and armor are melded. Casting spells becomes slightly more difficult. So with Spider Form, it's the earliest transmutation that turns you into something else. I'm not a big fan of Spider Form, though maybe I haven't given it a fair try. It is not very much on Spider Form's favor that it's a very low level spell. And that the only background that starts with it is not a very good background, so I pretty much just ignore it even when I do start that background. The one background that has a Spider Form as a starting spell is Transmuter, and Transmuter just kinda sucks. In general, all Warrior Mages suck, but I guess I will make a video about that. In fact, it's a good time to make a note of it, because otherwise I'm pretty sure I'm gonna forget about it. Okay, there we go. Note added. Sorry for that, but you know that I do these completely unedited. Anyway, Spider Form is not terrible, I suppose. Like, it does give you a ton of evasion at a point in the game where you're unlikely, to have large amounts of armor class or valuable loot that you would prefer not to be melded. So I would say that it is usable, but good? No, I wouldn't say that it is good. And just as much most early game spells and gear, you are definitely looking forward to upgrade away from this one. In that sense, Poisonous Vapours is more the exception than the rule. So I have to say that Spider Form is usable. I should maybe give Spider Form another try soon, to be, a bit more aware of this spell. But overall, I wouldn't recommend it. It's just too much of an expense early on. It is not nearly as good as other spells that we're gonna mention in the Poison Magic school. Poison Magic has some bangers. Next on our list, we have Meph. We have Meph. Mephitic Cloud. It conjures up a short-lived cloud of noxious fumes, which may cause confusion in a creature not resistant to poison. Tougher, more experienced creatures are less likely to be affected. This, as this line lets you know, means that monsters with high hit dice are very difficult to meph. You can see the chances to meph a monster If you target them with Meph, and yeah, like straight up, if you target them directly with Meph, the game will give you a line of text that will say chance to affect X%. And that is per turn as long as they're standing on the cloud. So if you manage to keep a monster on the cloud for long enough, it is going to get methed eventually. Most monsters, the monsters, obviously this doesn't work against monsters that are poison resistant, as you can see here in this line. So beware of, for example, orc warriors, orc knights, and orc warlords that happen to generate with poison resistant plate. Those ones do not get affected by Meph, which is quite the subversion, because otherwise they would die very easily to it. It is as easy as having Meph and having a dagger and just like poking them with your dagger until you get a couple of stabs and they die. And keep refreshing the Meph. Of course, you don't want them to become unconfused, because if such a thing happens, you would probably be in trouble. It is also very useful when you're using this spell to be poison resistant yourself, so that you do not get affected by the confusion and can move through the clouds unpunished. So yeah, I'm not that much of a fan of this spell because I do not like the risk that comes from tabbing monsters even if they are confused, especially on like my spellcasters. But it's okay. It also has a very nice synergy with Ignite Poison, where you can shoot your Meph and the clouds will linger, and then you can turn the clouds into fire using Ignite Poison. So that is pretty much like the only thing that pure Venom Mage that doesn't have any spells that are not Poison Magic can do against Skeletal Warriors and Whites, for example, early in the game. It also works very well against Hydras and other monsters that are poison resistant. Of course, if you're gonna do such a thing, do be aware that you probably need to be very tanky to survive tanking those monsters while they stand on the clouds of fire. It might take a bit longer than you expect, especially with something like the Skeletal Warriors. Hydras die very fast to that because they don't have that much armor class, but Skeletal Warriors do have a fair amount of armor class, so this doesn't work very well against them, but it is still an option to consider. Anyway, next on our list is that fantastic spell that I already mentioned, Ignite Poison, and it converts all nearby poison into liquid flame, burning poisoned creatures from within. It also turns clouds of poison and mephitic gases into flame. The caster is not affected directly. This means that you cannot cast this to remove lethal poison from yourself. And even if you could, it would probably kill you. But anyway, Ignite Poison is a fantastic, very powerful spell. It is glorious with Poisonous Vapors. It is not a stretch to say that if you find Poisonous Vapors and Ignite Poison early in the game with almost any character, you should turn into a spellcaster that casts those. Or at the very least, you should get them castable because they are an incredibly powerful ranged option. Very cheap to get, very reliable, very accurate. Very versatile as well, since it can hit monsters in a smite way, like smite targeting. So you can just target that back row orc priest or that back row deep elf high priest or the wizard or the bogart, and just get rid of them and therefore remove a big threat. Those monsters are monsters that appear at pretty much all stages of the game. This spell is fantastic with Toxic Radiance. The classic combo of Toxic Radiance Ignite Poison is part of the reason why I consider this spell to be so good. It will apply the poison and the damage to every monster on the screen. So it's like a good thing to do to just let the monsters be extremely poisoned from Toxic Radiance and then cast Ignite Poison and then get rid of the screen. If you happen to get your hands on Ignite Poison as a Venom Mage before entering Lair, entering Orc is, in my opinion, the best thing to do. The only thing that you truly have to be afraid of is Spellcaster Orcs, most likely the Sorcerer, since they can paralyze and you're going into Orc at a relatively low level. But as long as you can get that handled, whether it is by having allies or just like perfect positioning. As long as you don't give the orc sorcerers a turn to paralyze you, you should be fine. Um, because you're gonna kill them really fast as well. There's a couple of ways to go at it, but yeah, whenever I have characters with ignite poison and poisonous vapors or toxic radiance, more preferably toxic radiance before going into lair, I just go to work instead, and I get the shops, and yeah, that can be a big power increase for any character. This spell is priceless. It's such a good spell. I think I've already talked about it plenty when it comes to the fire overview and the transmutations overview, but yeah, just to reaffirm, I really like this spell. Next on our list we have Alistair's Intoxication. Oh, this is level 5. Well, I'll talk about it later. It's not very good, however. We have Toxic Radiance. Toxic Radiance. All Grip's Toxic Radiance causes a caster to radiate toxic energy, continuously inflicting poison on everything in line of sight for as long as the spell lasts. Um, and I just mentioned it when I was talking about Ignite Poison. Toxic Radiance, Ignite Poison is such an emblematic combo of spells. If you want to see it in action, I recently uploaded a Formicid using a giant cloth casting Toxic Radiance and Ignite Poison in Crystal Plate. Um, in Crystal Plate. So that should be enough to stress that this spell really is useful on any character that can get it castable, because it's so powerful when combined with Ignite Poison. Ignite Poison is the key. Many of these spells are okay without Ignite Poison, but they become incredible with Ignite Poison. And there's a reason why the Venom Mage start no longer gets Ignite Poison, because it was too insane. It was the best background in the game for a couple of versions, while it had Ignite Poison as part of the starting kit. Um, so yeah, Toxic Radiance, Ignite Poison, wonderful, fantastic spell for Orc. Not great for Lair, though it is fine for like Jags and Wolves and other monsters in Lair that are poisonable. It doesn't do anything against most snakes, doesn't do anything against hydras, doesn't do anything against many dudes, but it is perfect for bees as well. It is fantastic for bees. Kills them very quickly since they're weak to poison. This is great for spider. If you can survive spider for like a couple of turns, this just murders almost every spider. The couple of them that do not get affected by this are like the Pharaoh Ant, the Ghost Moth. Those ones you're okay with fighting one versus one, or you're okay with killing at last at the very end. Specifically the Pharaoh Ant, since when you kill it, it just turns everything on the screen into something that can be simulacrum. So you definitely want to kill that last. And this spell allows you to kill it last. It's pretty nice. So I would say that this spell is fantastic for Spider. It is unfortunately terrible in Snake, really good in Shoals as well. In Swamp it's kind of okay, leaning towards Bath. There's not that many dudes that are poisonable in Swamp. And anyway, the Swamp monsters are generally dangerous enough that if you don't have Ignite Poison, you don't really want to stick around and wait for them to just get poisoned to death. So you probably need something to complement it one way or another. If you have Ignite Poison, then you're complementing it with Ignite Poison, and if you don't, well, you better have like Stone Arrow or something else. There's many spells. You just use whatever suits your needs. Regardless, I think this spell is really good, and I also give it very high praise since it has a lot of power. It also has, in my opinion, the very nice, notable, like aspect or like property that it is the very first spell when it comes to like from lowest to highest that can hit literally the entirety of the screen at the same time. There's a book called The Unrestrained Analects that has 3 spells that hit the entirety of the screen, which are Toxic Radiance, Refrigeration, and Ignition. And Toxic Radiance is the easiest one for most characters to get castable. I think that there is some characters that probably shouldn't bother with any kind of magic. But those are like very few and far between, like the ghouls, the minotaurs, the maybe heal orcs because of bad spellcasting aptitude, and maybe or definitely the trolls. Most other characters can do very well with some spells. Um, so yeah, those characters probably want something in the offensive aspect, or in the on the offensive front, and I think that overall poison magic is pretty good for them. But anyway, next on our list we have Alistair's Intoxication. Mm. An Alistair's intoxication converts a small portion of the brain matter of those around you into alcohol, attempting to confuse all intelligent creatures within view, although poison-resistant creatures may resist the effects. The caster will experience vertigo briefly if they successfully make contact with other minds. It is frequently used as an icebreaker at wizard parties. This spell is I already talked about it in the transmutations overview. And what I said is that I have never used it, and that still holds true. I have played a fair amount of characters since the transmutations overview, and I still have not used this spell. There's a fair amount of spells in this game that I haven't really bothered with using. This is a level 5 dual school spell in a school that does a lot of things that I like, which is directly killing monsters. That doesn't directly kill monsters, so I don't often worry about learning these. Not even if I have the skill to cast Noxious Bog, or Statue Form, or Irradiate, which are other level 5, level 6 spells that are like transmutations. So yeah, it's really not for me, this spell. But if you like confusing monsters, trying to stab them after that or do whatever, then this might be a spell for you. As for myself, I like using Toxic Radiance and Ignite Poison a bit more. But I am not saying that those are exclusive with this. Like, you can definitely have all of those things combined, and it probably works very well. It's just that I don't generally bother getting this specific spell. Maybe I should try it next time that I have a character, like a poison mage character. Anyway, next on our list we have. Is it the final one? I think it is. Yeah, it is the final one. We have Eringya's Noxious Bog. It causes the character to release a torrent of sludge that transforms nearby areas into a toxic bog. The sludge damages and poisons all monsters, even those resistant to poison. The bog cannot form on areas adjacent to multiple solid features, nor on areas that lack solid floor, like deep water or lava. The transformation is temporary and cannot be sustained out of the caster's sight. Spell power will increase how long the bug lingers. This spell is very, very good. On its own, it's fantastic. It kills many things in many places where you wouldn't expect it to. Just to give a small example, it is a pretty good spell for Swamp. I said that Toxic Radiance is not good for Swamp, but this is. It does create more water in the form of a toxic bug, so you cannot really outrun Hydras, but you were unable to do that anyway in the first place. And this poisons the Hydras very heavily, unlike just normal water, and also unlike Toxic Radiance. The restrictions that this spell has that come from, cannot be sustained out of a caster's side, cannot form on areas multiple solid features, areas that lack solid floor. It's not really that much of an issue on some situations. There is some parts of the game where this spell is absolute trash. It also doesn't do anything against monsters that fly. Monsters that fly are completely immune to Noxious Bog. But I would say that this spell is good because it's one of the lowest level spells that just absolutely obliterates a slime. Even if you don't have Ignite Poison, you can use Noxious Bog and actually just like wait for the slimes to die because it deals crazy high amounts of damage, even if the slimes are poison resistant themselves. They're not immune. None of them are immune. So they just take good damage and they get super poisoned really fast. The sludge also prevents them from walking faster. It's like the monsters are standing on shallow water. It is even like that for some giant monsters that you wouldn't expect it to affect, such as juggernauts. Like they can fumble attacks from standing on the Noxious Bog, which is pretty interesting. It is a very unique property of this spell, which I like quite a bit. Um, and yeah, I like this spell quite a bit because it just kills everything. It affects a large area of effect. It doesn't check resistances, and it combos with ignite poison, so you can also kill things really quickly with Noxious Bog. Like literally, Noxious Bog, wait one turn, ignite poison will most likely kill everything that's standing on it. It is a really, really good spell, and I have, once again, nothing but the highest praise for it, even though it is not the correct spell for some situations. But that's what other spells are for, you know? It is fine for some spells to be like so overwhelmingly powerful that you can use them in every situation, but fortunately, no spells are like that, and you can, exercise your creativity by getting different spells. Mm, so yeah, I would say that Eringya's Noxious Bog has a pretty good niche in the game, and I think it is very solidly a good level 6 spell. I have heard from the Korean community at least that they don't really like this spell that much, but I think it is difficult because this spell started super bad. And it stayed super bad for like a couple of iterations. It got reworked a couple of times. The current iteration of it is really, really good, and I like it. So if you have not given it a try in recent versions, I would recommend you to do it. But anyway, I think that's it for the entirety of Poison Magic. I hope that you enjoyed this video. I hope that you found it entertaining. This school doesn't have that many spells, as you can see. I think it would be interesting if there were like higher level spells, level 8, level 9 spells in Poison Magic. But I guess there's none like that because the school is not like a school that aims to be like the hard carry end game school that, for example, the elemental schools are. But it's okay because it deals damage, and I like things that deal damage to monsters. So yeah. Mm, Oh, I was recording in my usual scene for starting the stream. This is the scene that I use for this. Well, I'm not re-recording that, so it's gonna be okay. Anyway, I hope that you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you around. Do consider subscribing on YouTube and maybe on Twitch as well. And yeah, I don't have much else to say. See you around.